So, we should, pardon?
What's your counter-argument to the claim that if government can create money at will and use that power all the time since we run away inflation?
It all depends on where the money goes. I mean, what Wall Street does is creates money without limit, pumping it into financial bubbles, which is a form of inflation. And it's done entirely through secret processes in conjunction with the Federal Reserve. You know, there's a lot of things we need to do. We need to make it totally transparent and make it publicly accountable. We need to know where that money goes. But if we break off into the discussion now, we'll be in the rest of the night. There's another wonderful, amazing program coming up. Anyhow, I say a lot more about the money system and what this means in the second edition of Agenda for a New Economy. I put a copy out on the table if anyone wants to look at it. A third design element, living enterprises with living owners. You know, this really starts with the idea that the real purpose of any business enterprise is to serve the community, not simply to generate profit. Profit is a means, it's not the purpose of the enterprise. Well, the Wall Street economy is organized under the control of global megacorporations with internal economies larger than those of most countries that are accountable only to absentee owners whose sole interest is in financial return. And even those in this room who may be socially responsible investors, if we hold money in a retirement fund or a mutual fund or whatever, generally we have no idea what companies we actually own or what they're doing. All we know is what is the financial return. Now, on the other hand, if you own an interest in a local business, you know what the business is, you know who the people are, you're in daily contact with it. There's a fundamentally different arrangement and enterprise. And we need to be organizing much more around cooperatives, community-owned enterprises, worker-owned enterprises, and so forth. Fourth design element, we call local living economies. The local economies where all these elements come together. And under Wall Street system, local economies are fragmented and they're controlled by outside interests that have absolutely no knowledge of or concern for what the impact is on the community. Local living economies, it's all part of this framework of redesigning, restructuring our local economies so they're controlled locally and we begin to function like subsystems of our local ecosystems. So we become increasingly self-reliant in energy and food and other basics on a sustainable basis. Okay, I want to end by going back through where we started, our three-point strategy for deep change. Now, such a dramatic transformation of an institutional system so powerful and so deeply entrenched as the complex of economic power that is driving the neoliberal agenda would be unimaginable except for the fact that millions of people around the world are already engaged in making it happen. And of course, Yes Magazine, which I know most all of you are familiar with, that really is our underlying mission, is to change the stories, but also to share the stories of the people who are actually making this change happen. And if any of you are not subscribers, it is a marvelous source of hope because you can begin to see how it is really happening. It is not just a fantasy. Now, three elements of the change strategy. Most of the work that I'm sure that you're all doing falls in one of these three categories. Change the defining stories of the mainstream culture. Every transformational social movement begins with a conversation that challenges a prevailing cultural story with a new story of unrealized possibility and ultimately displaces that old story through media and education outreach and through conversation. You know, a lot of this stuff is private knowledge. We have to make it public knowledge through our conversations so that we share it and we begin to realize that we all do share an understanding of these stories. The civil rights movement changed the story on race. The environmental movement changed the story about the human relationship to nature. The women's movement changed the story on gender. And as these stories changed, the society began to shift accordingly. We still have work to do, but these changes are very dramatic and within the lifetimes of many of us in this room. So we've seen how that happened. Our current task is to change the prevailing stories about the nature of wealth, the purpose of the economy, and our human nature, among others. Change the story. Number two, create a new economic reality from the bottom up. These are people who are supporting locally owned human-scale businesses and family farms, developing local financial institutions, reclaiming farm and forest lands, changing land use policies to concentrate population in compact communities that reduce automobile dependence, retrofitting buildings for energy conservation, otherwise working toward local self-reliance in food, energy, and other basic essentials. This is the work, for example, of the Transition Towns movement, which I know is very active here on Whidbey. I serve on the board of the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies, BALI, which is a support system for people building their local economies. Third element, change the rules. This is the public policy thing. Our current rules generally favor Wall Street over Main Street, favor financial interests over human interests. We need to turn those policies on their head, but it's through changing the stories, creating the new reality, getting people engaged in the new reality that we build the political power to force the changes in the political system to then support this new vision. As I noted in the opening, your position here on Whidbey to provide particular leadership on changing the story and creating the new reality. And this work you are doing potentially has planetary significance.
Yes. For you.
We humans are engaged in a monumental work of reinventing our societies and ourselves. It is the most exciting intellectual challenge and creative opportunity in the whole of the human experience. We have the power to turn this world around for the sake of ourselves and for our children for generations to come. It requires rethinking and reorganizing our institutions, including our institutions of higher learning and our local communities. Now is the hour. We are the ones we've been waiting for. Thank you.
So that was a heck of a good keynote, wasn't it? David will be ready for anything and everything tomorrow afternoon. The sanctuary, that will be emceed by Mark Yoel. So.